Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and President Danny, and distinguished guests, one and all, and my friend Naheed, who I welcome to Toronto. He and I were discussing the perhaps bad combination that you have, because they asked us to give 4 to 5 minutes of opening remarks each from the podium before having our chat with Allison. And he said, first of all, he said to me, and I'm not sure if he was directing this at me as the first of a shot of the morning, he said 4 to 5 minutes, not 45 minutes. And I then thought to myself, what a bad combination we had up here. Me, a former talk show host, and him, a former professor. Because we tend to speak in very long kind of, but I will be very brief. I do want to begin by acknowledging, as was already done, but my colleague, Councillor Michael Thompson, who works so hard on the economic development end of the City Council in the City of Toronto. See, what I'll do is use up my 4 to 5 minutes doing all this stuff, including the fact that I asked Mayor Nenshi sort of what he was going to do with the rest of his day, and he just said, well, it's mostly economic development. And I just turned to him and I said, you mean that means trying to steal jobs from Toronto? And he said yes. But having said all that, you know what? If we do our jobs right, there's lots of jobs to go around. And at the end of the day, it's really what I want to talk about just briefly in my own opening remarks, and I'm sure Allison will pick up on this and other things related to this. Cities, Canada, 80% of people live in cities. That's a truism that's repeated over and over again, and if anything, that percentage is going to continue to creep up. And they're coming to cities for a reason, which I think is, in the case of Toronto, I can certainly speak to Toronto's experience. I think it's twofold. I think number one is opportunity. And number two is that as we have the most diverse city in the world right here, people find comfort in coming from all over the world to places where there are other people like them in the context of their background and experiences. And I think that one of the great advantages we have here is that we can attract people from almost every country in the world, and they will find when they get here there's a community of people who've come from the same country and the same background already here. And it just comforts them in terms of that kind of support that they obviously would need when you have the courage to uproot yourself and move to another country and to another city. But if you go back to the first reason, and that's opportunity, cities are going to be, going forward, as we go through a fairly profound economic transformation, the place where there is opportunity. And just as there is an economic transformation that Mayor Nenshi can speak to better than I can, happening in all parts of the country, including Western Canada, there's one happening here too. We are transforming ourselves from a kind of commoditized or commodity-based economy to something that is a more knowledge-based economy. And so it doesn't mean you stop doing what you were doing before, but it means you have to adjust yourself to some new realities. And in our case, I guess if there was a crop we were growing here in Toronto where there isn't oil underneath the ground as far as we've determined, and there's not a lot of agriculture left, we were growing financial services and growing it quite successfully. We were growing life sciences and growing it quite successfully. But now as you move along the spectrum to an even more focused, knowledge-based and technology-based, innovation-based economy that is going to continue to focus on those same things, the challenge changes for us. And the challenge changes simply by virtue of the fact that we have to recognize what our strengths are as we head into that new era. I said it in a talk I gave yesterday that the Uber issue that I have a few scars from, just in terms of the strength of... Not as many as I do. Well, we can compare scars later. Somebody said to me this morning, by the way, that we were going to have a sparring session up here, and I said there's not much to spar on because we'll probably find we have many points of view in common, but he is a much younger man and more handsome, and he now says he has more scars from Uber than I do. But what that was really about, it wasn't about Ubers versus taxis versus whoever else. It was about whether we were going to be the kind of city, subject to making sure that the rule of law was in place, that welcomed disruptors and embraced disruptors and encouraged disruptors to make their home here, to grow themselves here, to say this was a place where they could come and establish themselves and then grow and sell their products and their services to the rest of the world, or whether we were going to be the kind of place that sort of said, ho-hum, we don't care, or even worse than that, we're turning our backs on you, we want you out of town. And I think that that is the decision point that we're at right now with respect to the innovation-based, knowledge-based economy. Do we want to do everything that we can to make sure that we are the home in the cities in Canada? And the reality is, because of the concentration of talent, because of the concentration of population, because in particular of the concentration of educational institutions of excellence, and because of the concentration already of technology startups and the test bed where they can experiment with what they're doing, namely established corporations, cities are going to be the place that innovation is naturally attracted to. I was talking to the president of Ryerson last night at an iftar dinner that Danny Asaf kept me out at until 10:15 last night, knowing he had me back here this morning. Didn't even offer me a room in the hotel to stay at. But, you know, we were talking about the fact that in the City of Toronto, right now, the City of Toronto, not GTA, the City of Toronto, there are 200,000 post-secondary students in this city. That is a great trump card that we're going to be able to play, but that is only going to happen in a city. That's no disrespect to the other universities and to the other cities. It's just to say there is a critical mass here, as there is in Calgary, of innovators and risk takers and smart people and researchers that are going to form the basis for this economy going forward. And I'll finish on this note. I said at a conference that I spoke at last week that I think the real challenge in front of us as people in governments is going to be whether we're prepared to place a bet on the cities, and do that sometimes knowing in this country in particular there's some political peril involved in that. And I will say that I take some encouragement from the fact that the new government of Canada, when it came to allocating transit money, and transit has a lot to do with this. Transit connects people to opportunities. It's a fundamental building block to making sure that you take that concentration of talent and be able to utilize it all over a fairly spread out geographic area. But they chose to allocate that transit money, controversially in some quarters, on the basis of transit ridership, which meant cities like Calgary and Toronto and Vancouver and Montreal, who really needed it the most, got money based on their transit ridership. And in this country it takes courage, because more often than not, money's allocated on the basis, well, everybody should get some because we want to keep everybody happy. And I don't think there's a big revolution taking place as a result of that decision, but unfortunately for the Government of Canada, I think they're going to have to take that kind of decision over and over again if they want to bet on the champions that are going to really make this country go, including fueling continued economic growth in rural and smaller city Canada. We have a program for athletes that's called Own the Podium. We have no hesitation about saying we're going to give money to the people who are our best champions to give them the best chance to get a gold medal in the world. And I say that the cities are Canada's champions when it comes to economic growth in the future for the reasons that I've tried inadequately and oversimplistically perhaps to lay out, and that we have to make bets on those cities to be able to drive the country forward and create the wealth that will allow us to do what else we have to do as cities, which is to close the gap between those who are comfortable and those who are struggling. You have to earn money before you can spend it, and tax it and spend it, and a fundamentally healthy private sector economy is going to be key to that. So I'll stop there. I think I was only 8 minutes, and thank you very much.